We're talking about living life in high definition. And I thought we'd go to the person who runs this podcast called Human Cogs, and she also spends an awful lot of time contributing to 3AW's afternoon program. Her name is Sabina Reid. What's life like in high definition?
Well, I think we were talking about high definition off air. Are we really talking about high definition now?
Yeah, we need to sharpen our focus about how tough life is at the moment living in Victoria. Yeah?
Yeah. Let's get serious, George, because tough times are here for all of us. And I don't have any hardcore research at this point because we don't have, it's a moving feast. We don't have enough time to gather data at the moment. But I can tell you the word on the street, anecdotally, from sitting with people in my private practice as a psychologist, speaking to people on the airwaves, as you just said, on 3AW, speaking within organisations, that people are feeling frustrated, despairing, and I think there's a real groundswell of anger that we haven't seen before. And I think probably the reason for this is that the goalposts feel like they keep changing, and humans don't deal well with change. We get an idea of what we're dealing with. I always say that when we know what we're dealing with, humans are really resilient and we find ways to cope and adapt. But when we don't know what we're dealing with, we really can throw the baby out with the bathwater because there's nothing to hold on to. There's no sense of certainty or security.
I like that image, that analogy that you've provided. They keep shifting the goalposts. It's like we changed the rules halfway through the engagement, and now we're sitting there thinking, do I really have to abide by these rules? And early on, do you remember the Premier was handling things impeccably? We were telling everyone he was being seen as a potential candidate to be Prime Minister of Australia. And suddenly, in the matter of months, it's all gone askew. And the public, that trust, that compliance factor has dissipated. And we're also seeing, last night we saw examples of it, a growing wave of civil disobedience.
Yes, but this is what happens when people feel so despairing and feel their voices aren't being heard. They feel a sense of hopelessness. They don't feel contained by the system that they live in and work in. Then we see this kind of really what we call antisocial behaviour as opposed to pro-social behaviour because we're out of control. I'm not condoning what we saw in yesterday's news last night. But when people don't know how, as I say, there's nothing to hold on to. And I think you raise a really important point here, George, and that's one of trust. And without trust, we have nothing. It is a fundamental building block. And I don't mean just in the hallowed halls of politics. I mean between human to human on a one-on-one scale, but also on a community level. When we don't have trust, we have nothing. And I think for Victorians, particularly at this time, we've tried so hard to be compliant. We've tried so hard to follow the rules, and most of us have. And the stories that I'm hearing are pretty heartbreaking. Some of the stories that I'm hearing around relationships where people are not able to see their loved ones. You and I have talked about aged care, but also geographically. There are loved ones. I've told you about stories of a father dying in another country. So there's deep grief, but there's also romantic love that's not being able, people aren't able to see partners long-term.
Yeah. They can't reach out.
They can't reach out. And I was speaking to a young man recently who has career aspirations. I won't go into the details, but in the industry, and he's been doing everything in his power to move towards this goal, physically and emotionally, and against some pretty tough odds. And when he thought that the goalposts were going to be changed on him, he was so despairing and so hopeless and angry, I saw in him as well, that these goals that he was trying to move towards suddenly had evaporated, or he perceived they had. So I think there was some confusion in the messaging. We know that now. State of emergency versus stage 4 restrictions are not the same thing. They're not interchangeable. But we're on a knife's edge, and we're not tolerant of confusion, mixed messaging, poor trust, and not knowing.
What are the sorts of things that we could follow? I mean, we talk about coping exercises. We talk about following a path to help our mindset improve. Are there little things that we can take on board? that we should address?
Yeah. It goes down to pretty much this universal umbrella theme of focusing on what we can control. And I think sometimes we feel there's nothing we can control, and that's not true. There are always things within our control. If we know that the goals that we had have shifted and we're not able to realise them in the same time frame or at all, then what is it between now and not knowing that we can continue to do to cultivate well-being, a sense of agency, a sense of connection, a sense of purpose and meaning? And one of my favourite quotes is by Viktor Frankl, who's a survivor of the Holocaust and wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And his work speaks very much around the importance of focusing on not what happens to you, but what you can do, what choices are available to you between something happening to you and your response. Between this, what we call stimulus and response, is this space, is this choice. And we all have the capacity to choose how we respond in this time. And I think that's, it almost sounds too simple to pack a punch, but to me, they're some of the more profound words ever spoken, and it's what we have to hold on to at this time.
Well, you've left us with something to hold on to. Sabina Reid, as always, thank you for, as I say, tweaking that message and giving us a sense of what living life in high definition is all about. Thank you, Sabina. All the best.
See you.
Thank you again. Sabina Reid from Human Cog Podcast and also 3AW.